Mayor Quinton Lucas is here, fresh off the U.S. Mayor's Conference taking place here in Kansas City late last week into the weekend, and a lot to get into here, things happening in and around town this morning. Mr. Mayor, thank you as always for the time. We appreciate it. So who was the rock star of the Mayor's Conference last week that showed up in town?
The rock star was Kansas City. I mean, every mayor, from the mayors of Philadelphia, Chicago, San Diego, some major American cities said, wow, Kansas City is impressive. It's the type of place we want to do business. Federal agencies came, big businesses came. We looked great. The Kansas City Police Department did an exceptional job. There were 14 mayors who came with police details of their own, almost all of them saying KCPD has it going on, Kansas City does. It was a great test run as we get ready for the World Cup and everything else coming Kansas City's way in the years ahead.
I'm not asking this to be a wise guy. I'm genuinely curious. Was the Oakland mayor here when her home got raided by the FBI last week?
You know, the mayor of Oakland, Sheng Tao, was not here. I've had the fortune of meeting her. I pray for her and wish her the best, as it seems she confronts a serious situation, but no, she is not. One of the more interesting things about being in this fraternity or sorority, if you will, of mayors is occasionally you're just reading the news headlines and you're like, wow, I hope it works out for them, okay? But usually you withhold comment and just see kind of what happens and take care of your own city most days.
Yeah, okay, all right, because I saw that she wasn't home. I wondered if she was here, but all right, that answers that. Interesting.
Now you broken news in the Bay Area, by the way, if you had noted she was here. But unfortunately on this one, we didn't have her.
Well, I thought about reaching out, and then I said, you know what, I'll hold off on that till next week. So you mentioned the World Cup. I saw this here in the Kansas City Star. The Kansas City's World Cup director quit, Catherine Holland. She served as both the director of the city's World Cup bid and later the entity KC 2026. I guess a couple of folks involved, including our city manager, has also stepped away from that board. With 2 years to go, how concerning is it that some of the big players involved in this town have decided to step away from this deal with 2 years to go?
Well, you know what is most astonishing? Probably two things. One, there was this piece in the Kansas City Star, the sports page, which is increasingly becoming the news page, and I welcome that in many ways, broke real information, some things that I didn't actually know, which was interesting, but probably far more telling for any of you who study the world of politics. The reporter in the piece writes that he spoke to the board, he called board members, half of them spoke to him. Half of them spoke to him and background on what was going on with the board. That is radical. If somebody's doing a story on the Kansas City mayor's office, my hope would be most of them say, no, just go to this one person and get it. Not just that half the people say, oh, yeah, this is what I think is going on. Oddly enough, I was not one who actually had the fortune of speaking to them, but, that was interesting to me. What that said was this isn't just sour grapes, perhaps for one, and I cast no aspersions as to the viewpoints of the now separated director. But what it does say to me is a lot of people want to make sure their voices are heard. What that means is a lot of businesses and a lot of communities who are involved with this cup want to make their voices heard, and they're not feeling that right now, and that to me creates an issue. I will answer one point that I saw on social media. People said, it's Kansas City, Missouri screwing up something again. This board is actually set up in a way to give us almost no particular power, right? There are 2 Kansas City, Missouri board seats, but there are appointees from the governor of Missouri and Kansas. There are state senators from Missouri and Kansas. The business leaders who are on the executive committee, there are no people in politics that are on the executive committee. This is the sort of thing that's set up to avoid any type of particularized jurisdictional influence. The problem is sometimes when you render the influence of persons a total impossibility, perhaps what you start to see is something like this, where everybody's wondering where is happening, where is this thing going? And I think that's what you saw from that piece, which frankly does give me some level of concern. I look forward to having conversations with the executive board at the World Cup to make sure that the tens of millions of dollars and taxpayer money, and if we're going to do the Missouri-Kansas thing nowadays, I'll note that the state of Missouri has put in $65 million with more to come so far. The state of Kansas has put in about 29.5. I think that, there needs to be some real accountability as to what we have going forward.
So that number, Missouri, and I've heard that number, I think it's been well reported on, $65 million out of Missouri, about $30 million out of Kansas. And how much out of Kansas City for the World Cup?
I threw the Missouri money in, Kansas City money in the Missouri money. So $50 million to be exact from the state of Missouri, $15 million from the taxpayers, the 508,000 taxpayers of Kansas City, Missouri. That's compared to $28 million total for the state of Kansas. And so far on local government jurisdictions, your home county, I don't mean to dox you, but it's a big one, Johnson County contributing $1.5 million. Although it's got about 100,000 people more than Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay. All right. So those are the numbers. That's it. Yeah, it's a big number. Now, speaking of Kansas and obviously what's going on here at the state lately, since we spoke last week, Laura Kelly has signed that piece of legislation, of course, as they try to entice the Chiefs and or the Royals across the state line. You know, I know you're friends with Governor Kelly and you share a political party, but when you look at it, Laura Kelly did sign that border war truce. She claims it never included the teams, but there's nothing in the border war truce when you look at it from 2019 that discluded the teams. So how disappointed are you in the governor of Kansas?
You know, I think the governor of Kansas is an exceptional governor because of things that she does, like fighting for access to health care for Kansans, for balancing budgets, for improving schools. I think she's done a great job for the people of Kansas. I think this is a sideshow issue that ultimately will result in almost nothing. I think the teams will continue to play in Kansas City, Missouri. So generally, I don't think that this in any way materially impacts my view or any Kansans or Missourians' view of how great the governor of Kansas is. That being said, I mean, look, I've read a piece in the Kansas City Star this morning. I'm still an old fogey who reads the paper. And it's kind of laughable, right? All these primarily Kansas officials are saying that, yeah, this doesn't impact the border war truce. Why? Did you have like your fingers crossed behind your back? I mean, I don't see how it doesn't. Foundationally, and actually, I know you have Pat Toomey on sometimes, the libertarian folks. There were a series of editorials this week, including the editorial board itself in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, that pointed out what any person with a brain would say. The two states are now in a fight using economic incentive tools to attract teams that already exist within the two states. This is like square one, the border war truce. This is just a much bigger example of it. What is going to happen next? Everybody is now looking at Missouri and saying, how much money are you going to give the Chiefs and Royals? And then the Chiefs and Royals are probably going to turn around and say, all right, Kansas, this is what they said. How much money will you give us? And that'd be great if state money and city money wasn't actually taxpayer money, but it is. I mean, think about the tool that was created in Kansas. It is actually, in addition to Star Bonds, which, as we all know, is not the only thing paying for it, if it even can, but it's taking away extra lotto money, taking away extra gambling money, i.e., to my friends in Kansas, money that taxpayers can use to do things like fix roads, to pay for law enforcement, to do all types of other work. I mean, that's the laughable thing. And then this whole idea that economic incentives aren't like part of it, what does that mean? I mean, Kansas has created new tools to attract Panasonic. Missouri has created new tools to attract data centers. So it seems as if what they're saying is, if there was not a deal currently in contemplation back in 2019, then everything else is all fair ball. And, you know, there was an economic development director on the Kansas side who said, well, Mayor Lucas last week was speaking with emotion. No, I'm just a common sense guy who seems to understand how these things go. And my view of the world is that, yeah, if Missouri gets, somebody saying, oh, yeah, it'd be really cool for us to have, I don't know, KCMO talk radio back in KCMO, the city, then I imagine, I guess under this new standard, we can say, well, radio stations weren't directly contemplated. I don't see anything that says radio is not part of the border war truce, so let's have them. And where that becomes scary is almost nothing is almost directly contemplated within it. That's the problem with this exception of, this isn't part of it. And that's why I think, frankly, you saw the deal get killed. And look, this isn't me out of emotion. In some ways, I'm just a dude who's going to be out of office at some point. So I just want Kansas City to be better long term, the region broadly. But, when you have the president of the Kansas State Senate saying, I didn't even sign a deal, so it doesn't really apply to anything I do. When you have the state of Kansas, in my view, very much using the poaching incentive type of thing, then yeah, I think it's fundamentally off. Now, we can all pretend like it's still on until the day that the next deal comes, and then we say that's exempted. But, that's where my issue would be. Mm-hmm. And I could talk about this probably all day.
Yeah, no, and certainly we've done a lot of it the last couple of weeks. No, and hey, if KCMO Talk Radio ends up back in KCMO, we'll let the power players involved figure that one up. That's well above my pay grade, I will say that much. Hey, give me
huge incentives, Pete. Huge incentives coming for you.
Hey, as long as I'm exempt from the earnings tax, I am very much open to it. I'll say that much. We got a minute here. Give your best piece of advice if you are coaching your old pal, Joe Biden, into the debate tonight. What are you telling him to do, Quinton Lucas?
I'll be honest, right? The best way to debate is to never try to take on, emulate the debater you're with. So don't get into the personal affronts, the fictitious narratives, the number of things that former President Trump, is going to try to share. Say the facts. Say the amount of dumpster fire issues that were addressing this country back in 2020 when President Trump was voted out of office legitimately. Don't get into investigations and Washington speak and all that sort of stuff, because I think, frankly, the American people have, for better or worse, moved on. And instead say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make grocery prices better? What are you going to do to get health care to more? What are you going to do to get more jobs to people around our country? I think Americans, by and large, still stand with Democratic talking points when those are core Democratic beliefs. If you spend a bunch of time talking about whatever is, on the cover page of the New York Times or what 200 people somewhere in Washington think, then you're going to get distracted. So I hope that all works out. It should be fun, an early presidential debate that can maybe shift the narrative in a positive direction right now for the months ahead and get us back into the fundamentals of what this election is about, not the personalities.
I know you'll be watching, as will much of this audience tonight. Mr. Mayor, thank you as always for the time. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
All right. That's Quinton Lucas on KCMO.